Yeah, it's our time to shine. Show that's the kind of state of mind you gotta combine with hard work and time. You gotta climb to the top. Don't let yourself drop till your heart stops. Let this beat rock. Got a new clock and a new stock for this new rock. Just let your mind loose from the new stock. Drunk off the goose, thinking that I'm too pop. Getting caught with a few thoughts cause I'm too lost. Off the speakers can't even handle me. Giving what I got, nobody's gonna drain my energy. And I will never stop, I'm motivated by enemies. Setting up shop so everybody remember me. And no, I am not going through life regretfully. I'd rather work non-stop, what they call incessantly, than waste a more job just to live life pleasantly. Already got lost in my mind, not a fantasy, I'm getting it. Forgotten souls, so stop, drop, and roll. You lost all control and pop off your balls. I got squat, I fall, I'm not bought, I'm sold. My stock rocks, it's gold. Hey, knock, knock, she holding shit, talk to close. I ain't stopping though, it's hip-hop, you know. Or is it rock and roll? I'm not dropping down, no, my pocket's grown. You can't stop the show, so get rockin' on. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. Taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't here to make friends. Yeah. I ain't never slowing down, keep on going till I'm down. No, I'm never slowing down cause we're blowing up now. I ain't never slowing down, keep on going till I'm down. No, I'm never slowing down cause we're blowing up. Hard words like a weapon, attack with no questions. In my own section and they still disconnected cause their mind's been infected and they're filled with objection. Too filled for recollection so we're losing all attention. They don't know I'm in contention cause I'm gaining their attention. Cause I'm making a connection. Lyricism and aggression got me feeling my ascension. In my passion, my profession, I'm attacking my obsession. Taking action and progressing. I go off on the enemy, that's what makes them scared of me. Make my plans carefully, then execute them daringly. They say I act recklessly, but that's why I'm effective. See, you can't predict my tendencies, I offer no transparency. Some people think I'm lost, others think I'll be a legend. I'm never gonna stop till I'm one above second. And my thoughts at the top, but my mind stay present. Don't let your dreams stop, cause dreaming is a blessing. They tell me all the same, told me I won't make a name. But it's not about the fame, it's about keeping me sane. So I stay within my lane, feel my blood pump through my veins. Feel adrenaline, no pain, welcome all to my domain. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. I'm taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. I'm taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up, I ain't never giving up. I'm taking that crown from you. I ain't worried about you, I ain't never. So let me break it all down for you.
Hey, beautiful people. Welcome to Aussie True Crime. If you're new here, I like to cover mainly Australian true crime cases and paranormal cases that I make along with Spirit Time. If you'd like to help the channel, the members link is always to the top, but it's not obligated because, of course, I'm still going to come and be here anyway. Hi, MacJoy. Hi, beautiful Kaz. How are you, darling? Julie, how are you? Welcome back. Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking about another Australian case. Just want to bring up my presentation and just pause it. Okay, back a second. And we're going to be talking about Bonnie Clarke. Now, this is another one that comes with trigger warnings. I am going to be talking about, obviously, passings, and also SA is involved in this. So if any of those trigger you, please just turn off. If not, do you know what I mean? Just giving trigger warnings for the case anyway. So let's get into it. Today we're heading all the way back to December 1982. And we're going to the suburb of Northcote. It's here in Melbourne. It's about a 30-minute drive from the heart of the city. How are you, Mark? So I have put a map up here. So you can see Melbourne. I don't know if you can see my marker, but Northcote's this way. Can you see? Okay, well, it's kind of up a little bit, but it's about 30 minutes from the heart of the city. And anyone that knows it, Melbourne, we're on the bottom in Victoria. So where this one happened, they lived in a cottage-style home in the West Grove, and there lived a sweet little girl named Bonnie Clarke and her mother, Marion 𝔕𝔕𝔦𝔯𝔕. Plus, they had 2 family dogs as well. As you can see, the houses were very close together. That's how a lot of them are here in Melbourne. It was an older style home, but you got to remember too, as I said, this was going back to 1982 as well. They're cottage style homes as well. A lot of them, they were all very similar. So Bonnie's mother and father were separated. Her father, this is Bonnie here. Her father, Dennis Clarke, did live here in Melbourne, but he didn't live with them. So we're going to jump forward and we're going to be going to the evening of Monday, December 20th, 1982. It was a day like any other day. Of course, it was just 5 days before Christmas because we're talking December 20th. Bonnie had got her photo taken with Santa. Next one. This was her with Santa. December to January in Australia is also a 6-week summer break for school children. So no doubt Bonnie was feeling very festive and excited for the weeks ahead. That night, Mara tucked her daughter into bed and heading to bed herself. At around 1 a.m. in the morning, Marion awoke to use the bathroom, during which time she heard Bonnie yell out and ask for a glass of water. Marion got her a glass of water and they both went back to sleep. This would be the last time that Marion would actually see her daughter alive. The next morning, Marion woke up around 7 a.m. She checked on Bonnie but saw that she was still asleep, so she headed off for her morning shower. After her shower, she was doing a few things around the home. Marion went back in to check on Bonnie. She had woken up, and she was quite surprised to see that Bonnie hadn't actually moved because, she'd been making quite a bit of noise around the house. That's when Marion noticed just how pale her daughter was, and she quickly rushed over to Bonnie and pulled back the sheet. And I do want to give trigger warnings again, just in case. Because as I said, we're dealing with a 6-year-old passing here. So, as always, I'm not going to go into graphic detail. This was a little one of Bonnie when little with Mum. As always, I'm not going into graphic detail, but this is the topic, and if you're sensitive to it, maybe it's just best to skip this live. If not, do you know what I mean? I'd love you to stay around and listen. So Marion pulled the sheets back and she discovered her pale daughter laying with her clothes on, and she had a single stab wound to her chest. Although it appeared that her body had been wiped clean, as only a trickle of blood remained, Marion immediately ran to the phone, the emergency services, and soon the police arrived and there was a crime scene established. The first thing that investigators took note of was that there had been no forced entry. However, this could be explained by Marion, as she did admit to leaving her back door open for 2 dogs to come in. And of course, remembering it was 1982 and leaving a door unlocked was a very common thing in these days. But Marion also described her backyard as a maze and said it would be incredibly difficult for an intruder to make their way through in the dark without being heard. But to that, 2 family dogs, do you mean you'd think they would be barking at strangers, and they didn't? Nobody heard anything, not even the neighbors heard a single thing that night. The forensic pathologist concluded that Bonnie had been digitally ripped, trigger warnings, and suffocated with a single stab wound to her chest, and that came from a knife in their kitchen. Despite the sexuality motivation aspect of the crime, there was no semen that was detected around Bonnie either. Bonnie's missing pajamas were soon located as well. They had been on the side of her bed, between her bed frame and the wall. And as in any cases with the passing child or anything, the first person the investigators have to look at is the parent. So Dennis Clarke was soon spoken to, and he had an airtight alibi. He was a dad. He was at his home on that evening, and this could be verified. Therefore, he was ruled out within a few days. I do have a photo of Dad. So this was her father. Marion, however, of course, she was home the night, and this was Marion. However, she was home and on the night. Early on in the investigation, investigators began to look at her as the prime suspect. As I said before, by her own admission, she left the back door open and admitted that the backyard would have been hard for an intruder to go through. Plus, her dogs always used to bark at strangers, yet that night they didn't make a sound. And unfortunately, this information that Marion was giving the investigators to help them out, of course, was in their eyes, making her look even more guilty. And the investigation actually began to theorize that perhaps the sexual assault had been a red herring or a distraction created by Marion in order to make them believe that a male had been there, or it was a male predator, but with the lack of semen at the crime scene. Do you mean it only added to their theory that maybe it could have been Marion herself who done it? Hi, Mac Joy. How are you, my darling? And unfortunately, with no other suspects on the radar, this lead investigation, like the investigators, to form a tunnel vision early on in the investigation and really focus in on Marion. And she became the prime and only suspect. And when I say tunnel vision, I mean this investigation became fixated on one person, Marion, and they couldn't see past that. No one, I mean, they weren't even looking for other people, sadly. And this, of course, led Marion to become angry and bitter, and loosed in the leagues. As you can imagine, I think this would, I mean, any of us would feel the same way if we became the prime and only suspect in our daughter's passing. Unfortunately, because of this tunnel vision, they didn't have any other opinion to keep in mind, or they didn't look for any other opinions. Poor police work and poor investigational work at the time. Murder of Bonnie Clarke became a cold case and would remain that way for 2 decades. So now we have to fast forward all the way to 1999, and that's how long it became a cold case. In 1999, Victoria's first cold case squad was formed, and that was a big thing for our state. So anyone that's not in Australia, Victoria is one of the 5 states of Australia. And 1999 was when we got our first cold case squad. So this cold case squad, in the cold case squad was a man named Ron Illes. Now, if you're in Australian true crime, and I have spoke of him before, you will know his name. It will be familiar, or at least it might ring a bell. I'm a very big fan of this man. And he has been in cases I've done, and he'll probably be in a lot of cases that I cover. But Ron Ellis is a former homicide detective. His nickname is Australia's greatest detective, and for good reason. He has solved hundreds of homicide cases here in Australia. He has a conviction rate of 99 out of 100. So it's not too shabby if you ask me. He does have his own show. He has his own podcast. He is retired now, but do you mean a lot of the ones? Did you think the mum did? I'm going to get to that. As I said, the case at the moment was very tunnel visioned on the mum. By the time I learnt about this case, Ron Ellis had already been on it, so I kind of fast forwarded to the end and knew the as I said, he also has his own show. It's called The Good Cop, if you ever want to look it up. He's also got his own podcast. One thing he is known for is what he often says. You've never heard of him, Kaz. You have to look him up. The Good Cop is his show. So I'll send you some links. He is amazing. One thing that he's very well known for, though, is he always says the answers are always in the file. Do you know what I mean? He's a very big person that thinks that the answers are always there. You just have to look. Anyway, because I'll be referring to him throughout this video, I just want to give you some context as to who he was. So around this time, the Herald Sun newspaper printed a story about the newly formed cold case squad and discussed Bonnie's cold case as well. And as luck would have it, in this article, it caught the attention of someone that had been friends with Bonnie. Yeah, I know a lot of American ones, but Ron Ellis is amazing in Australian crime. So this was the news article that was formed, and a woman named Kylie Ward. Do you mean she was childhood friends with Bonnie? It was actually, in fact, Kylie's boyfriend that had contacted the newspaper after Kylie became quite emotional reading the article and told them, "I think I know who is responsible." The newspaper journalist referred Kylie straight to the homicide squad, in particular straight to Ron Ellis. So she went down to the police station and she told them what she knew. She told the detectives that in 1982, when herself and Bonnie were 6 years old, that the pair of them would often have play dates after school at Bonnie's house, and it was around this time that Marion had a boarder staying with her in the house because Marion had been struggling a little financially. So I'm just going to bring the next picture up. Is again of Bonnie. So a boarder was a really good option at the time to help out men with the bills and everything, but he was there less than a year, and all counts, Bonnie and the boarder got on really well, like brother and sister. In fact, according to Marion, if there was ever an issue between them, Bonnie never said anything to anybody, including her own mother. However, Kylie did tell the police that she witnessed something on these play dates, and then she'd been keeping them to herself for almost 2 decades. When Bonnie would sit on the boarder's knee, he would often be inappropriately touching her. Now, I don't want to analyze this too much because I'm not a psychiatrist or a child psychologist or anything like that. But B, I have limited information as well on this. We're only just going off what Kylie said, so we can't prove any of it either. And I'm being a guest too. Do you know what I mean? 2 6-year-old girls may not understand what they're saying, or she may. Do you know what I mean? It may have taken her till she got older to realize what was going on. So it's possible that neither of them could fully comprehend just how serious the situation was, or maybe they felt embarrassed or ashamed or too scared to tell anybody. It's also likely that it's only with the passing of time that Kylie could truly understand what she had witnessed, and maybe she had comprehended these memories because of trauma as well. I don't know, and I don't know the two girls' discussions between them on what had happened either. Again, I don't want to speculate on such a horrible and traumatic situation, and I'm not a psychologist. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm just speculating from what I've researched. But regardless of any of that, I am so glad that Kylie saw the article and was brave enough to come forward with the information. I'm sure that what would have taken so much courage and also meant that she had some relief from a lot of the trauma. It also goes to show why it's really important to keep discussing cold cases, because you never know who will see it and who will hear it. Yeah, they would have been scared as well because they were 6 years old. As it turned out, Kyle was not the first person to mention this border in relation to Bonnie Clarke's case. In 1982, one person that the detectives spoke to described the border as creepy, and another one told them that he may have suggested a comment about liking children. When Bonnie emerged from the shower to dry herself off, unfortunately, though, the investigation did not actually have the name of the border, and as Marion was still considered a suspect because they were still tunneling visually only on her, they didn't ask any other questions of the name of the border at the time. And that's where I mean, like, tunnel vision can really harm a case if they've got one person in mind. I mean, the detectives basically weren't looking and listening to the other things that were being said. It was also around this time that Bonnie's father, Dennis Clarke, reached out to Ron Ellis as well. After seeing the news about the newly formed cold case squad, Dennis had unfortunately been diagnosed with cancer, and he did not know how long he had to live. One thing he did know for certain, though, was that he wanted to see his little girl get justice before he passed away. After speaking with Dennis and hearing his dying wish, Ron Ellis became more determined to solve Bonnie's case, and thank Lord he did. Ron Ellis, along with another detective named Tim Day, began poring over Bonnie's case files, looking for anything that may lead them to an answer, particularly looking for anything that may lead them to who the name of this border was. It took several months, but eventually the name of the mysterious border... Oh, have I gone too far? Okay, I didn't know that one was next. The mystery border was acquired, and they found out about a Mal Clarke. He was no relation to Bonnie or her family, by the way, and although his name was quite common and a little vague as it was, they had no middle name, no full first name, and they weren't even sure that they had the correct spelling of Clarke. But having something was better than nothing at the time. I also knew that Mal Clarke was an assistant projectionist at the time of Bonnie's passing. A projectionist, by the way, is one of those people that stands in a little room at the cinema and operates and maintains the movie projectors. I think, anyway, well, at least that's what I think it is. I don't know if they still have jobs for them or if it's all digital now, but that's what it used to be. Computers are probably taken over. So Ron Ellis and Tom Day sifted through his criminal records until they came across another guy named Clarke. who also happened to be a movie projectionist as well. Probably not a super common career, I'm guessing. And this Joe Clarke guy had a pretty horrific criminal history as well. And he also had a link to Bonnie Clarke that was never followed up on at the time. Again, we go back to the tunnel vision. So this case, seriously, from the beginning to the end, it blew my mind, just preparing to be angry and shocked and all sorts of things. So from June 1980, 2 years before Bonnie had passed, Joe Clarke was responsible for the passing of 20-year-old Teresa Verdi Crow. What is this woman? And this case would remain unsolved as well for 3 years. Joe Clarke was responsible for her passing, and this case, as I said, would remain unsolved for 3 years. Then in August 1983, Joe Clarke brutally arred his neighbour in West Brunswick in Melbourne. The 1983 victim would actually give police a description per attacker that would lead them to Joe Clarke. And when Clarke's house was raided, they found evidence tying him to the unsolved murder of Teresa Crow. And this evidence included some blood-stained clothing and a scrapbook filled with the newspaper clippings about Teresa's passing. There was also another piece of incredibly interesting evidence that was not linked to Teresa. And I have a picture of it. So that's Joe Clarke. But it was this. It was a card addressed to Bonnie Clarke. There's only a photo of the outside. I haven't got the inside of it. But it was a greeting card. I don't know what was written on the inside, although I don't think this information was ever actually released, or at least I couldn't find it. But regardless of what was written on the inside of the card, was that a man who, by the way, was in his late 20s at this time. And at this point, he had a card that was addressed to Bonnie Clarke, who was 6 years old. So, do you mean alarm bells start ringing? They also found children's clothing in his home. And for a man with no children, this was pretty odd. So the investigators on Teresa Crow's case took this card to the investigators who are now investigating Bonnie Clarke's case. And do you know what they were told? Don't worry about it. The mother did it. And those were probably not the exact words, but of course, as I said again, just unbelievable, the tunnel vision. Even when they were presented with something new, they weren't looking at it because they just said the mum did it. They didn't have the proof, but the tunnel vision. It can really harm a case. Now, I've seen detectives actually decide to speak to Joe Clarke about Bonnie Clarke, asking him where he'd been that night of the passing. So they did do that much at least. And Joe told them that he was working as a projectionist at the Greater Union Picture Theatre at the time. So the detectives working on Bonnie's case thought, well, okay, this man has an alibi. I guess he didn't do it. Except they never actually verified the alibi. So back to Teresa Crow's case just for one moment, because that case in itself, although there doesn't appear to be a ton of information out there about it, it was incredibly interesting and a confusing one. Teresa Clarke, I think she's the next one on here. Yeah. So Teresa Clarke was found deceased in her home. She was wrapped in a blanket with a knife wound leading to her throat, from her throat to her groin. And this unusual injury was actually thought to be part of some satanic ritual at first. Her body, like Bonnie's, had been wiped clean. An autopsy report found that she had passed from strangulation. So she passed from strangulation and had been deceased about 12. Hang on. Had been deceased about 12 to 15 hours when she was found, although it was later determined and that this was incorrect. Her apartment was very cold and in part slowed down the decomposition, like the decompositions and process going on. And in fact, she had been passed for about a week when they discovered her. Now, Joe Clarke had an alibi for the time of her passing that they originally determined, but not for the actual time of her passing. So they checked the alibi for 12 to 15 hours, but not actually a week earlier. I'm pretty sure I actually heard of the case, like of another case where a killer was messing with the heaters and the air conditioners as well to throw off time of a victim's passing. So it is, people do it. Usually making the room hotter to speed up the decomposition. Not that this was the case. It was, in this instance, it just reminded me of another case that it had happened. Anyway, so Joe Clarke did eventually confess to accidentally trigger warning, take the life of Teresa Crow after what he was claiming to be consensual sex, claiming that after laying on top of her, he unknowingly suffocated her because she was so little and he was so big. Therefore, he somehow didn't realize that he was suffocating her, and the strange wound discovered he didn't know. The one they thought was the satanic ritual was apparently just to throw investigators off, and believe it or not, a jury actually believed this story. It's amazing what they will believe. The next one's a paper. So this was when, the article about Teresa. So Joe Clarke was charged with manslaughter, going on to serve just 11 years in jail. As manslaughter does carry a much lighter sentence here in Australia. And if you're not already, you know what I'm going to say next. It's because our Australian system, or our justice system, really sucks. It does. So we not only had these similarities between Teresa's passing and Bonnie's passing, the cleaning of the bodies, the crime scenes taking place in the victims' homes, but we also had this card that was addressed to Bonnie. Yet no action was taken, and Bonnie's passing went on to remain a cold case. So if you haven't guessed by now, Mel Clarke, the boarder, and Joe Clarke, the criminal, were one and the same. His full name was Malcolm Joseph Thompson Clarke. Again, no relation to Bonnie and her family. They were the same person. So this is Malcolm Clarke, same person. He was just 28 years old. He stayed with Marion and Bonnie from January to September of 1982, giving him more than enough time to get to know the family dogs, the layout of the home, the backyard, and becoming aware of the fact that Marion left the door open and locked at night time. At this point, Ron Ellis decided that the next course of action was to look into his unverified alibi that Malcolm Clarke, or Joe Clarke, had given for the night of Bonnie's party. Ron and Tim Day contacted the Greater Union Cinema to see if by chance or a miracle that they still had the shift records from December 1982. As luck would have it, they did, and it was pretty unbelievable. Actually, I feel these days that shift records are probably wiped clean from computers annually or something. I don't know. But do you mean they had it? They knew that on December 21st, 1982, the night of Bonnie's passing happened, or the 20th. It was Malcolm Clarke's day off, so he wasn't working. If only police had verified 20 years earlier, it just goes to show how tunnel vision can really affect and in turn prevent a case from being solved for years. The attitudes of these original detectives are actually really sickening to me. Reminds me of the Claremont serial killer, which also coincidentally took about 20 years old. Early on in the Claremont investigation, they were super focused on one particular person or suspect, which, as it turned out, he was not the killer. And this poor man, Lance Williams, had to live the better part of 2 decades of his life living with the knowledge that at least some members of the community believed that he had killed 3 innocent women. I do have a picture of him. I mean, he was, again, his case was done with vision. The police actually followed Lance around for years, which is really sad anyway. With all the information, it didn't necessarily prove that Malcolm Clarke was the person who was responsible for Bonnie's passing. After all, it was pretty much circumstantial. I mean, they didn't have enough evidence. So the next step was to actually track down Malcolm Clarke and try and find out a little bit more about his involvement, because they just didn't have the evidence. I think the next one's still Lance this is when they were chasing him around. So at the very least, they could rule to find him now and at least rule him out or rule him in after speaking to him. As a subject, around the time that Ron Ellis suggested that Marion also take a polygraph test, because you got to think they still thought the mum did it, so that they could once and for all confidently say that she had nothing to do with her daughter's passing and she passed flying colours. Although it should be noted that a polygraph test isn't admissible in court, it is still a useful tool nonetheless to assist investigators and give them some kind of sense of direction of the case. So back to Malcolm. In 2001, the investigators learnt that Malcolm Clarke, who was by this stage in his late 40s, was still living in Melbourne and was working as a volunteer at steam railway called the Puffing Billy, and he was in a relationship at the time with a lady named Lorraine. The next one is the Puffing Billy, where he worked. So this is where he worked then. Ron Ellis decided that instead of bringing Malcolm Clarke in to question him, where he was pretty unlikely to confess to anything based on the evidence that they had at the time, they would instead send an undercover officer to work and befriend him and attempt to extract some information that way. So a new guy, and I don't know what his name is. We'll just, for the sake of this live, we'll call him Bob. A new undercover investigator went out. So soon Bob, the undercover police officer, was trained up as a volunteer at the Puffing Billy. Working as a guard, the investigator became aware that Malcolm was a keen photographer. So guess what? Was also becoming a keen photographer. The pair soon bonded over their love of photography, taking photos together of the Puffing Billy Railway as well. During this time, Malcolm also admitted to Bob that there was a girl he enjoyed, and that was taking photos of young girls. Have you guys? I haven't been on it, but I have heard of it. So I'm guessing Bob, being an undercover officer, or pretended that he wasn't fazed and he didn't judge this unusual hobby of Malcolm's, and that probably made Malcolm feel a little bit more open to him, even more. If Bob wasn't going to judge Malcolm on his illegal hobbies, then he could possibly open up and tell him other things. You know what I'm saying? So over the next several months, Malcolm and Bob became the best friends, and so Malcolm thought. And bit by bit, he began to divulge personal information to his newfound pal, until one day on a drive home from a shift at the Puffing Billy together, Malcolm finally admitted to Bob that he was responsible for Bonnie's passing. He walked through the back door. Trigger warning, he stabbed her. The way that he told Bob almost suggested that it was a relief, him finally being able to tell somebody to his long held on secret. Soon after the admission, Mal Clarke was arrested and charged with the passing of Bonnie Clarke. Before his interview began, he requested to make a phone call to his partner, Lorraine. He told Lorraine that he'd been arrested for the passing of Bonnie Clarke and requested that she arrange to have his Puffing Billy uniform returned to his workplace and let them know that he wouldn't be returning. He made a full confession that night, though he did insist that he had not meant for Bonnie to pass. In fact, he said that he had been incredibly intoxicated the night of her passing, which quite frankly is hard for me to believe personally. How does someone that is intoxicated manage to navigate their way around the backyard that was apparently a maze, sneak in a home, wake nobody, Jimmy not disturb the dogs or the neighbors, go into a kitchen, take a knife, and then go and take a little girl's life and then clean up as well, and then still leave no evidence behind? Yeah, that's what they all say. I don't know about you, but I'm sure as hell not that efficient after when I'd had a few drinks. He also told investigators 2 pieces of information that was never publicly released, and that was that he did wipe the body clean with a cloth, and he had stuck the pajamas down the side of the bed, confirming that he was indeed responsible for Bonnie's passing that night. Although later in court, he did claim to be innocent again. Another thing that they all do. Despite this, in 2005, at the age of 50, I think I got one day of the court. Yes, this was him in court. The age of 50, Malcolm Clarke was sentenced to a minimum of 5 years in jail for the passing of Bonnie Clarke. Now, 2 months after this, Bonnie's father actually passed away from the cancer. He did hang on just long enough to witness justice being served for his daughter, although he did state before his passing there's no such thing as closure for him. Like, even though he's seen the justice, there wasn't closure. Bonnie's mother, Marion Wishart, after more than 2 decades, finally had her name officially cleared from any involvement in her daughter's passing. This was, it was a frustrating and a tragic case for so many reasons. A cold case that could have and should have been solved so many times earlier than it was. And Ron Ellis said that was indeed, as he always said, the answer was indeed already in the file. Detectives just had to dig. On the original detectives, just had to dig that a little bit deeper, and if they had, I think they would have seen the answers was right there in front of them all the time, along the way. But of course, because of the tunnel vision that they had, it didn't help in this case. So it really goes to show, and this is one thing, it's sad. This case really frustrated me when I was doing my research, but it really does go to show the tunnel vision that some detectives can get, why it's good to have fresh eyes sometimes look on these cold cases, and the fact of talking about them. I know, a lot of the cases I do are closed cases, but even the ones that aren't closed, you never know who's listening, you never know who's watching, and it only takes that one person to have the right clue that can string it all together. But our justice system does suck in Australia. I will agree with that. And sadly, this is, it stopped this case for 20 decades from being solved. But that's it for Bonnie's case. I think that's about all. So I'm going to leave it at this one. I do hope you all join us. I have been doing an advent calendar countdown with my granddaughter. So if you haven't seen that, come in and watch them. We were up to day 10 today. So it will be day 11 tomorrow, and you're all welcome to come and watch. Other than that, I'll be back next Sunday with another true crime case. Thank you, everyone.
There's too much that's going on, I don't know what to do. Paralyzed by options in this world, can't pick and choose. Yeah, everybody's life is on display, including you. Yeah, I feel every day is just the same, stuck in a loop. I need some variety, I'm sick of this anxiety. I'm sick of this society, they make us feel a rivalry. Compare ourselves to others, but we all got different mothers. We were raised in different structures, so we're different, it's no wonder, yeah. I just want a great life, something where I feel like I just didn't waste time. Something I look back and say that was a great time. Cause man, I just hate when the years pass by the wayside. Yeah, lost inside, and I need a little time to find who I am in this life. I will find a way to feel alive. I'm so lost inside. You better watch out now, I figured something out, what this whole life's about, yeah. It's not the goal, it's the journey, wasted emotion is worry. I'll stop being in a hurry, yeah. I'll just enjoy what I'm doing, keep pushing forward and moving, appreciate the improvement, yeah. I was so stuck on a goal, was losing sight of my soul. Need to enjoy getting old and be so present. I don't know if there's a heaven, but I know I wanna get in. And sometimes I feel a presence, energy in a direction, so I follow intuition. It took me to a musician, now I'm on a different mission, to help others with afflictions. Now I'm not lost inside, I finally have seemed to find who I am in this life, and I found a way to feel alive. I'm not